guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over how to read, understand, and interpret the major arcana cards. First, we're going to be seeing how each of the cards in the deck relate to each other, and then we're going to go a little bit more into detail into each card as well as each card's reversal. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Consists of 22 cards that symbolize the road to enlightenment or the path to spiritual awakening, starting with the Fool and ending with the World. Every card from the Fool to the World, therefore, is another obstacle to be overcome and is another step in order to reach spiritual enlightenment. The cards tell a general storyline that can help guide a person from the very beginning of their life to the time where they reach spiritual awakening. One of the originators of this line of thought was Carl Gustav Jung, who was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who founded analytical psychology. According to Jung, the major arcana of the tarot deck represents two life cycles. The first symbolizes how the self interacts and connects with the external world, and the second cycle symbolizes how the self interacts with and connects to the subconscious mind and the true inner self. The midpoint between these two cycles is the 10th card, the Wheel of Fortune. The general storyline that the cards tell goes something like this. The Fool enters the world without any sort of experience or knowledge with external life. He is therefore completely innocent and hopeful and optimistic. He represents the newly born child who's naive and foolish due to lack of experience. The Magician is the first person that the Fool encounters on his path to spiritual enlightenment. The Magician represents the emergence of the ego and of self-awareness. The next four cards in the deck, the High Priestess, the Empress, the Emperor, and the High Priest or the Hierophant, represent the four powers that rule the world that an infant becomes aware of. Those being male, female, material, and spiritual. These cards can also be interpreted as how the ways an infant interprets the world. Intuition, feeling, sensation, and thought. The next card in the deck is the Lover's card. This represents the first important choice that the aquarant needs to make in their lifetime. It's the choice between two options, two paths, the choice between independence and dependence. From here onwards, the aquarant becomes responsible for all of his or her actions that they take. The next card in the deck is the Chariot. This represents the creating of a persona or a mask that the aquarant uses to then move through society. We now reach the Justice card. The Justice card is the voice of consciousness. We have reached an epiphany that we must now develop the subconscious mind as much as we have developed the conscious mind. And that brings us now to the Hermit card. The Hermit card represents entering into a period of self-reflection and meditation and withdrawing from society to think and plan for times ahead. This is the last stage of life that is required before reaching the Wheel of Fortune and entering the second cycle of life. Which brings us to the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune is the midpoint between the two life cycles. Our peak has been reached and it is now time to descend into the unknown of the subconscious. The Strength card indicates the fearlessness that is needed in order to confront the subconscious. It is the courage to jump into the unknown. Now it is time to face our first obstacle in the second life cycle, the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man symbolizes sacrifices and the reversal of beliefs. Now we start to hear the voice of the subconscious. Our next stage is the Death card. The Death card represents complete and total transformation. It is a transformation of the consciousness and the transcendence of the ego. This represents the death of the old self so that the new self can be born. After the Death card, we reach the Temperance card. The sacrifice of the ego has been victorious, and the conscious mind and the subconscious mind begin to harmonize. The imbalance that was indicated by the Justice card earlier is now beginning to be recognized and fixed. But the danger isn't over. Now we reach the Devil card. The subconscious mind has been freed, but now the querent must face and conquer his mindless instincts. Once those instincts have been overcome, we reach the Tower. The Tower is the destruction of everything that no longer serves the higher self. It is the ripping away of illusions and walls that have been built up in the first cycle of life, as well as everything that is no longer compatible with the new self that has been born. Once those walls have been ripped down by lightning, it brings us to the Star. The Star card represents great potential and divine guidance. We are now starting to hear the voice of divine guidance that will guide us through the last obstacles on our path to spiritual enlightenment. Our final great trial is a Moon card. During the Moon card stage of the second part of life, everything is shrouded in illusions, and this represents a test of faith. Once the test of faith has been surpassed, we come to the Sun. The Sun is peace and harmony. Both the conscious mind and the subconscious mind are beginning to combine themselves into one. It represents the coming together of the mortal and the immortal, the self and the higher self. Which brings us now to the Judgment card. This represents the rebirth of the integrated self. We are now a person with accurate and sound judgment due to our mastery of both the conscious and the subconscious mind. Which brings us to the end of our journey, spiritual enlightenment, in the World card. The World card represents complete fulfillment and order. Psychic wholeness has been reached, and this card represents the end of an era. Which brings us back to the beginning of the deck, the Fool card. The Fool, after reaching spiritual enlightenment, no longer ignores threats out of naivety, but rather ignores them due to complete and total faith in the universe and in himself. So now that you have a general understanding of the storyline that the major arcana tell, let's get into each and every individual card to go over their meanings as well as the meanings of their reversals, which is when a card shows up upside down in a reading. Alright guys, so just a couple of side notes before we begin. I've got two tarot decks in front of me. I'm using two just so you can kind of see how two different tarot decks compare and contrast to each other. This deck on the left is the Tarot de Dragon, and this is its box by Manfredi Toraldo, and this is the little booklet. This deck on the right is the Tarot Esotérico, or the Esoteric Tarot. This deck I don't have the book for because it was inherited. So the decks have the same exact cards, however, and the cards have the same general meanings, but when you have two different tarot decks or several, the cards can have subtle differences that can make a reading more specific depending on your individual interpretation of the cards. So another thing that can be different is the order of the cards. So one thing that is common is sometimes strength, the strength card and the justice card will be inverted. So here in this deck, justice comes first, strength comes later on in the deck, and in this deck, strength actually comes before justice. Another thing that will change is the placement of the Fool card. Sometimes, usually the Fool card will come in the beginning, and sometimes it will come in the end, and sometimes it'll be in the middle. So in this specific deck, the Fool is card 0, is the first card. In this deck, however, because the author of this deck connected all of the major arcana cards to a specific letter in the Hebrew alphabet that had the same sort of meaning as each card, the Fool was assigned to the second to last letter because they had sort of overlapping symbolism. And so the Fool card is technically supposed to be second to last in this deck. I've moved it up to the beginning so we can kind of compare and contrast both cards at the same time. Other than that, when you buy a new deck and you have a booklet, don't be afraid to use the book, but also don't be too worried about memorizing all of the meanings. Just let whatever sticks with you from the first read through to stick with you, and don't worry about memorizing other things. When I buy a deck, I'll flip through and I will write down my first impressions of each card, and only then will I look at the book and I'll kind of compare how my interpretations compared to the actual description. You'll see that more often than not, your intuition will be pretty spot on, if not, then in the ballpark. So with that being said, let's get into the cards. So the first card we have here is the Fool card. And when we have a deck here and we want to interpret and read it, there's kind of three questions that I ask myself, or that you should ask yourself when you're looking at a new card is, if there are words on the card. Not all the cards in a tarot have words, but if they do have words, if they're in the major arcana, what do the words make you think of? This is the Fool card, so, what are the characteristics or traits of a fool, in your mind? And what does the imagery specifically of each card make you think of? What does it bring to mind? So, the Fool card represents the beginning of a new cycle of destiny. Okay, there's an important choice to be made, and there could also be an unexpected influence. So here in this card, we see that there's a dragon. Here, there's also a dog that's biting at the Fool. So this could be the symbolism of an unexpected influence. This person is kind of a dreamer. You see, he's kind of got his head in the clouds. He's not really paying attention to his surroundings, and we'll talk a little bit more in the reversed meaning how this kind of cliff comes into action here. But yeah, someone who's a dreamer he hasn't had a lot of life experience, and so he's very open-minded, very free-spirited, and innocent. And that could result in spontaneity and also very hopeful, very optimistic vibes from this card. And this card, and I might have mentioned this already, can symbolize an important choice to be made. And this is because this is the first card in the deck, and the Fool has to choose whether or not to continue or to start this journey, whether or not to stay on safe ground or to kind of go off this cliff and into the unknown. And so when these two cards are reversed, let me just reverse these for you guys here. This could mean foolishness, it's the Fool card, so when they're reversed, and by the way, I do read with reversals. You don't have to, but I personally think that it can make a reading more dynamic. And when you read with reversals, oftentimes people will just say, oh, it's the opposite, and that's it. But when I read the cards, it's not always just the opposite for me, for my interpretations. A card being reversed can also mean an internal problem rather than an external problem. So something dealing with, your inner self rather than, an external issue. It could also mean that whatever this card talks about upright, reversed is kind of blocked. So instead of it being the opposite, it could be something that, like, the upright meaning is being blocked or delayed in some way. So that's kind of how I read reversals. But other than that, this card, which is the Fool card reversed here, foolishness. And we have a little bit of naivety. The Fool isn't really paying attention to the threats around him. He's kind of about to go off this cliff here, not really paying attention to his surroundings. So it could be a little bit of recklessness and impulsiveness, as well as risk taking. A little bit of, it could also point to irresponsibility almost. And so again, the Fool upright, gotta pick up this card here. The Fool upright can mean beginnings, innocence, and an important choice to be made, and reversed, it could be foolishness and naivety. So let's move on to our next two cards here. Well, the next card, there's just two of them. The Magician. So the Magician is all about power and skill, not just physically, but also mentally. So you'll see here, very strong man depicted in both of these images. So lots of external strength, but also lots of inner strength as well. You'll see on his helmet here, he has the infinity sign, and the Magician also has the infinity in the esoteric tarot, also has an infinity sign. And that could be kind of like the limitlessness of the mind. So lots of potential here. Somebody who has a lot of strength of will. And also, when the major arcana cards come up, this could be a major event, or this could also be a very influential person that it's symbolizing. And whether or not the person in the image is male or female, these cards can apply to men or women, really anybody. So the Magician, somebody who's very self-confident. And you'll see here, we have two sources of light in both cards. We have this sort of like external light, and we have this light on his staff that's kind of coming from his inner power. Same thing on this card, we have the sun here in the background, but we also have this kind of like glow that's coming out of kind of like his soul. And this could be pointing to, you know, inner self-confidence, initiative. We have someone who's very creative and someone who's willing to face risks. I always, you know, one of the things that kind of pops out to me is this chessboard here, as well as this dragon who's kind of disappearing behind him, kind of fading out, almost as if this is like the inner dragon. And a little bit more symbolism on this side. He has these rings around, and if you can see, each of these circles has a planetary symbol, as well as the Hebrew letter right here in the corner. I'm not going to get into the meaning of the Hebrew letters, nor the kind of astrological symbols, which are the planetary and zodiac sign symbols, because then the video would be too long. But if you guys would like to see a little bit more of that, then I can definitely do a video on what those symbols mean. Right now we're just going over like the classic meanings of each card. Okay, so upright, power, potential, strength, inner strength and outer strength. Reversed, the Magician can mean weakness and failure of nerve, as well as hesitation. So also because, you know, there's magic involved, this could point to an inability to face reality. Because the Magician has, you know, the potential to be a very egotistical, the Magician can also point to manipulation, as well as poor planning. And because of this kind of creative energy, this card being reversed, coming out reversed, could point to a creative block. So those are kind of the meanings of those cards reversed. Moving on to the next card, the High Priestess. So the High Priestess upright is all about the reveal of hidden things. She's very strong. So here we have this dragon, and here we have this woman, the High Priestess. These cards also say the High Priestess points to the subconscious, all about listening to intuition and listening to instincts. This is also about spirituality. So if you can tell, you know, it's nighttime here. The dragon, the High Priestess in this card, is asleep. And nighttime is all about, you know, the moon, the subconscious, and spirituality. Reversed, this card can mean emotional instability, as well as, you know, upright, this is all about listening to your subconscious, your intuition. So reversed, this could mean that there's a lack of listening to your intuition, resulting in a lack of foresight. There's a reluctance to take advice as well. And this card reversed can also point to a hidden agenda of some sort. Now, when you have cards that can have kind of several or contradictory meanings, it's always good to, when you have a reading with two different cards, just see what the other cards mean and then kind of narrow down what each specific card is talking about. Okay, so now we have the Empress. So again, going back to the questions that we asked ourselves, you know, what are the traits of an Empress? What do you think of when you hear the word Empress? So for me personally, I think of a woman who's very strong, very stable, but also someone who is caring towards her people. You know, good rulers care about their population, their populace. So, and effectively, this is kind of what this card is talking about. This card is all about fertility and abundance, as well as motherhood, stability, security, and protection. You know, you can see the abundance here in this card. In this one, it's raining. So we have water, which is the life force of the earth. And in this card, we have lots of nature. She has leaf print on her dress here, as well as there's piece of corn kind of levitating in the background. And this all points to abundance, as well as inspiration from nature. And, you know, if you look at the position that they're sitting in, it's very stable, lots of stability. They're very balanced. And in this card specifically, it almost looks like a martial arts position. And here in this card, she's very balanced out. She has the 2 lions at her feet, as well as she has 2 dragon wings, and you know, they both have wings up here. Not only that, but her little palette or painting that she's holding has both night and day, kind of a yin-yang type pattern. And so reversed, the Empress can mean domestic upheaval, overprotectiveness, you know, the extremes. There's an imbalance. You know, there's either not enough protectiveness or too much. Then it could also mean sterility or unwanted pregnancy. And because the cards upright mean abundance, the Empress reversed can also mean poverty or being over-reliant on something or someone. So yeah, so reversed, we've got poverty, domestic upheaval, and maybe a little bit of overprotectiveness. And upright, we've got fertility, abundance, and protection. So the next card that we have is the Emperor. So the Emperor is all about willpower, self-control. He's someone who's very, you know, he has a lot of authority. He's very ambitious, and he has a lot of knowledge and experience that he's going to use combined with his creative energy to get the things done that he wants to get done. So again, very strong power, strong masculine energy coming, as well as a little bit of protectiveness as well. You'll see that, you know, here in this card, there's 4 lambs, and this dragon has kind of, quote unquote, killed the enemy or protected his lambs against the enemy. So this dragon is protective and vengeful. So if someone does wrong to somebody that he loves, he will avenge his loved ones as well as protect them. And same kind of energy from this card. Reversed, the Emperor can mean immaturity. There's a weakness, or there has been a loss of influence. There's, you know, goals that aren't being met, a failure of ambition. As well as this could go to the other extreme, saying that there's excessive control and domination, an almost inflexible type of power that needs to be addressed. So again, upright, we've got willpower, self-control, and ambition, and reversed, we've got a weakness, a loss of influence, or excessive control. Now our next card is the Hierophant, or the High Priest. And the Hierophant is both of these cards depict a spiritual mentor. There's someone who's very wise and who's going to give inspirational help and good advice. You know, so some of the symbolism that you can see here, you have this spiritual mentor who's teaching his 2 kind of pupils, as well as you have this dragon and the Dragon Tarot, who's, I don't know if you can kind of spot them, but in the background you see there's 3 different school of fish. So school of fish, teaching, you know, and this is, by the way, how you can kind of thread the meanings of the cards into the actual depictions on the card, really kind of analyze each image and pick out some symbolism. The Hierophant upright could also mean tradition and comfort from religion. So, you know, in the esoteric tarot, you see obviously a very religious figure here. In this card, not so much, but if you notice here, his tail is actually curved around this cross, as well as, the tradition really stands out to me in the background here when you have these kind of Greco-Roman pillars in the background here, so all about tradition, classical architecture. And because of that, when the cards are reversed, when this card is reversed, it could mean going against tradition or challenging the status quo. It could also mean bad advice or a distortion of the truth, propaganda. And so how do you know, which of the meanings is coming up? And this is when you really have to look at the other cards in the deck. So for example, this card could be rebellion. And if this card came up next to the devil card, which we will see later on, which also has kind of rebellion-ish vibes, then that's kind of what this would be pointing towards. If this came up next to the High Priestess reversed, the High Priestess reversed is also reluctance to take advice. So this could mean someone who's not taking advice from a spiritual mentor or from any mentor, as well as coming up to the next to the High Priestess could also point to hidden things or hidden agendas or misinformation. And so again, upright, the Hierophant is good advice, tradition, and wisdom, and reversed, bad advice or distortion of the truth, as well as a bit of a rebellion, challenging the status quo. The next card is the Lovers card. And these two, I always love putting these two cards next to each other because they're the cards in the deck that I think have the biggest kind of difference between these two decks. And so in the Esoteric Tarot, you see this very classical lovers depiction where it's a man between two women and there's this Cupid in the background up above him, ready to shoot an arrow. And below him, he has this kind of diverging path here. In the Dragon Tarot, however, you see this man who's killed this dragon and is now bathing in the blood of this dragon. And this is a great example of a card where you might have to look at the book, which is definitely what I had to do, because I looked at the card and I was like, how could this mean the lovers? And when you read the book talks about how this man has entered into a contract. He's kind of killed this dragon to take a blood oath almost, to become immortal, to reach immortality. So there's this immortal contract that he's entered to, and that can symbolize marriage, as well as this card. Obviously, the man is choosing between two women. And so upright, this card is making an important choice. But talking about the difference between these two decks here, I see more indecisiveness in this card than in this card. And when these two cards come up in a reading, when this card comes up, I see more of indecisiveness. Whereas when this card comes up, I see almost there's an important choice to be made, yes, but it's almost as if the choice has already been made. Or rather, we know what we're going to choose deep down already. So, and again, you can kind of interpret the same card differently depending on which deck it's in. And so just kind of showing you guys how that's done. This card can also be listening to your intuition and inspiration over, intellect and reason. Listening to your heart type of vibes. As well as the card could also be making a choice between independence and dependence. So reversed here, this card can point to a danger of a moral lapse. In this card, you see if you interpret one of them to be his wife and the other to be perhaps a mistress, you see, there's a danger of cheating. Or in this card where he's, killed or slayed the dragon. So danger of moral lapse when this comes up reversed, as well as severe temptation. Again, indecisiveness, as well as also commitment issues. Perhaps there's a contract that is not being honored, or a partnership that is not. And again, I know it says the lovers, but this card doesn't necessarily have to be about love or a romantic relationship. It could also point to a business partnership or a family relationship or even a friendship. This is all about partnerships, relationships with another person, or a contract that has been entered into. So the next card is the Chariot. The Chariot is all about success, triumph, secure progress. You see, this card could also talk about, self-control. And this comes out a lot in this card. You see he's riding this dragon here. And he doesn't have saddles or reins or really anything, but he's still kind of controlling this dragon out of sheer will. And here you see that he has lightning in his hand. He's, controlling this sort of, again, Roman type of gladiator chariot. And, a vehicle that is kind of infamous for being very hard to control. So very fast-paced progress here. When this comes up upright, it's, very secure progress. And also talking about victory, there's a merit-based win. If you win, when this card comes up, it could talk about something that you're going to win, but it's not out of luck. It's out of, hard work that's been put into, reaching that goal. Now, reversed, this could mean a lack of control or direction, or you're going in the wrong direction. As well as this could be almost like a sign of arrogance or aggression. There's an egocentricity or a ruthlessness that's causing a halt of progress. And the next card is the Justice/Strength card. And so in this deck, Strength comes up now. In this deck, Justice comes up now. So we're going to be talking about both. But first, let's talk about Justice here. And I'm going to pull out the Justice card so you can kind of compare them side to side. All right, so now that we have Justice side by side, the two Justice cards. Justice is all about, justice. Fairness. This points to a favorable outcome of a dispute. There's an agreement that has been made through a negotiation with somebody. And this could also point to good karma, honesty and accountability. There's a balance. This card can also point to the law. And reversed here, this card can basically mean the opposite of justice, which is injustice, as well as bias. Maybe there's a prejudice going on, or somebody's being dishonest, is not being fair or accountable. And so that's kind of the overall meaning of these two cards, upright and reversed. The next card is the Hermit card. The Hermit card is all about withdrawing from society to create a plan and to think. There's this kind of taking things slow. These two figures are very wise. You see this dragon atop of this kind of mountain of wealth here, but I take this to be kind of like a symbol of inner wealth of the mind and of intellect. In both of these, there's this lamp, and in here he's, this man, the hermit, is lighting the way almost. And so this could also mean discretion or silence, maybe help and advice that needs to be sought, as well as introspection and meditation. Now reversed, the hermit can point to a refusal to listen to or ask for help. And again, if this card were to come up next to the Hierophant reversed, this would definitely point to, not taking advice or not asking for help. But again, the hermit reversed could also be a rejection of wisdom, or there's a fear of change, or a fear of loneliness. So a fear of kind of taking the time to retreat from society because of loneliness and not really taking the time to meditate by oneself. So upright, we have withdrawing to think and plan, taking things slow. And reversed, we have a refusal to listen to advice, or a fear of loneliness, a fear of change. Now we have the Wheel of Fortune. And again, this points to the start of the second life cycle. And this is all about chance. There's a new beginning because we're starting a new life cycle. And upright, this is all about good luck. The laws of fortune are in play, and there's a turn for the better up ahead. Now reversed, this could point to a turn for the worst, or temporary bad luck. Or there could be something that's delayed, or an unexpected change. And that could be a negative change, or it could just be a bit of a change that shakes things up. Wheel of Fortune upright could mean good luck, a turn for the better. And reversed, we have temporary bad luck, or a turn for the worse, or something that's changing unexpectedly. Now our next card is Strength, and again, in this specific deck, Strength came up earlier, but I switched it just so that you'd have both Strength cards here next to each other to compare it just a little. Strength is all about, again, what it says on the tin, strength. Courage to take a risk, inner strength. So, in this card, this points to just like strength of Mother Earth is what I see. You see this dragon who's holding up the land above him, as well as in this card you see this very strong figure who's holding a weapon in his hand. So to me, of course, the dragon is obviously very capable of defending themselves, but because in this card the man is holding a weapon, I feel more aggression-ish vibes from this card. That's how I interpret them. Whereas this one, it really comes out as sort of inner strength and inner courage, because, it's inside the earth, inside. And so, but again, this could also mean reconciliation with an enemy or with, your instincts, your instinctive desires. So this card could also point to self-control. And reversed, this card can point to a defeat or a weakness or a lack of self-control. There's a lack of courage, something you're fearful of or doubting. Yeah, so upright, we've got inner strength or, courage to take a risk, self-control, and reversed, we've got a lack of self-control and fear and doubt. The next card is the Hanged Man. What's really interesting to me, and in a lot of decks, there will actually be a Hanged Man kind of upside down. But what's interesting to me is that the two tarot cards that I have, in the two Hanged Man cards, there's no people. So it's kind of just like this empty background. There is no actual people in the background. And so, just an observation, but here the Hanged Man upright is all about, adaptability. You're becoming a little bit more flexible, changing. There's change up ahead. The next card is the Death card, so, there's change up ahead. And this is all talking about the need for flexibility and maybe sacrifice. As well as this points to a trial of faith that we have to go through. If this card came up next to the Moon card, which is also like a crisis of faith, this would point very heavily to a trial of faith. This could also mean letting go of limiting beliefs and wisdom and guidance specifically from the subconscious. So, for example, if this card were to come up next to the Hierophant upright, that could mean, lots of wise guidance, lots of wise advice coming from within. And reverse, this could point to, there's a danger of materialism. There's a bit of selfishness going on, or there's something that you're not being able to let go of, as well as there's a situation on which you're lacking perspective almost. And something needs to, maybe your mindset needs to be a little bit more flexible, and you need to let go of some limiting beliefs when this card comes up reversed. And the next card is the Death card. And this card is all about huge, unexpected, major change. There's this big transformation that you have to go through. Like we said before, this is kind of like the death of the old self or the end of an era. And this can also be, destruction that comes as a blessing in disguise almost. Going back to the death of the older self, you see specifically in this card, in the ground, you see lots of kind of material objects. We see crowns, staves, swords, a painter's palette, a farmer's tool, a human head. And this is talking all about, the destruction of the old self. And, here in the back, you see these Ankh. This is the Egyptian symbol for life. And this all points to, there's a new beginning, a rebirth. In order for something to be reborn, it first has to go through a period of transformation. So a death followed by a period of transformation. Now, when this is reversed, when the Death card is reversed, it points to the enforced removal of something that should have been let go. So, if we keep going with the idea that the cards point to kind of like a life story towards enlightenment, if during the Hanged Man, we have not sacrificed those limiting beliefs or something that should have been let go of, when we reach this specific stage, if the Death card comes up reversed, it means that that thing is being taken away of, by force. You're being forced to let something go, but that you should have already let go. So this is the forced transformation here. As well, this card reverse could also point to the inability to move on or resistance to change. So again, upright, unexpected major change and transformation, and reversed, a forced transformation. Which brings us to the Temperance card. The Temperance card is all about the combining of two opposites, about balance and moderation. So two things have reached, they're in a harmonious partnership. This card also talks about success through control. So, I always point to this card. She's sort of mixing two different things here. And that's the symbol of balance, obviously. And when the Temperance card is reversed, this can point to disagreements or an imbalance. There's an excess of something or not enough of something. And this could also point to being overwhelmed or being overburdened by something. And so once again, upright, the combining of two opposites, and balance, and reversed imbalance. And now the Devil card. So the Devil card, upright here, we have hidden forces or hidden forces at play. There could also be a misdirected passion or an unhealthy obsession. And this card could also point to, baser instincts. And that has to do with rebellion. And so kind of what we mentioned earlier, this card upright could also be about rebellion. Not necessarily bad, but just pointing out that there's a rebellion going on against something. However, reversed, this card can point to a severe unhealthy obsession, almost bordering on addiction, if not an addiction. There's a lust for power or an unwillingness to break a bond. If the Death card and the Hanged Man have come up reversed here, it's definitely something that, is not being let go of, something that's kind of being held on to very tightly, but something that should be let go. So an unwillingness to break a bond or to let something go. This card reverse can also point to an imbalance when it comes to sort of baser instincts. And baser instincts is just kind of like just instincts, subconscious instincts. And so when this card comes up reversed, this could point to a kind of repression of instincts, sort of like those instincts are being oppressed too much, or it could mean that those instincts are being given into too much. So there's an excess of baser instincts. Which brings us to our next card, which is the Tower. And the Tower is all about the destruction of, outdated philosophies and anything that no longer serves you, no longer serves the higher self. This is all about evolution through destruction. And so with this card also comes a heavy dose of flexibility. You've gone through a sudden shock or a sudden loss of some sort, a sudden change, and with that there is the need for flexibility. And so when this card is reversed, this could point to an inflexibility or a disaster that's happening that could have been avoided or that could have been changed. So there's a vibe of sort of unnecessary suffering. So upright, we've got destruction, evolution through destruction, and reversed here, we've got a disaster that could have been avoided. And the next card is the Star. So the Star is all about inspiration, great potential, as well as, spirituality, the widening of horizons, and new life. Reversed here, though, this could point to a rigidity of the mind, so not as open-minded as we need to be, or encouraging us to be open-minded. And this could also point to a lack of faith or a block of progress. there's some self-doubt going on. And so upright again, spirituality, hope, great potential. And reversed here, we've got a lack of faith or a block of progress due to maybe some self-doubt. Now the moon card upright, as we've signaled before, I might have mentioned this before, this is upright, points to a crisis of faith. This points to a need to listen to intuition over your reason. And it could also symbolize illusions or dreams, something that is hidden or occult. Again, if this comes up next to some other cards, it can kind of point to what the definition or what the meaning of the card is going to be. So if this comes up, for example, next to the High Priestess upright, it could, or reversed, it could mean something that's hidden, secret that is hidden. Or if this comes up next to, for example, we just saw the star is all about faith. If the star is reversed, it's lack of faith. So if the star reversed came up next to the moon upright, it could mean, there's a lack of faith going on. And the moon reversed here, there's still this crisis of faith, but it's even more severe when when moon is reversed. This is the inability to use or even possibly listen to intuition, or a failure of nerve, a failure of this willingness, or there's a fear going on. Could also mean deception, so perhaps being lied to or being manipulated in some way. So just again, upright, the moon is a crisis of faith, wants you to listen to your intuition over your reason. And reversed here, we've got the inability to listen to reason and, being lied to or being, decepted. Our next card is the Sun card, and this is the most joyful card of the deck, in my opinion. This points to, joy, success, safe refuge, positivity, literally all of the good things in life, as well as patient growth. So, here within the Sun, we've got this Triskele or Triskelion, and, this is all about balance, almost, the balance between several things. And again, just the Sun is the symbol of, hope and positivity and patient growth. Now, reversed, I interpret this card to be not necessarily the opposite, but rather just a little less positive. This could mean, a partial success, or there's a delay or frustration of some kind. This could also point to, this card being reversed can also point to your fantasizing over success rather than, having real success. So this could also be a misjudgment of a situation almost. The next card is the Judgment card. And the Judgment card is all about, accomplishment and rebirth. There's almost like a second chance that's being given, and also improved conditions that are on the way. Reversed, however, this could point to loss or guilt or a wasted opportunity. So maybe a failure that has passed or maybe will pass if, advice is not being heeded. And so upright, we've got accomplishment and rebirth, second chances, and reversed. And reversed, we've got a wasted opportunity or maybe a loss of some kind. Which brings us to our very last cards, the World. So now the World is all about, again, accomplishment, but this is more integration of, the conscious and the unconscious. This is the final completion or culmination. We've reached the end of a cycle here. And again, also, the World coming out upright could also point to travel on the horizon. And the World being reversed like this can point to a stagnation or a loss of momentum. Maybe also a lack of closure, because this is the last card. So upright, this can mean the end of a cycle, and reverse, this could mean like there's a lack of closure. The inability to move forward, again, comes up with the World reversed. And with the World upright, we have reached our final stage of life. We have reached spiritual awakening. Which brings us back to, and I'll pull them back out, which brings us back to the Fool card. Now the Fool card, when it comes at the end of the deck, is all about, you know, we talked about how he's over this cliff here, and he's not really paying attention to the cliff out of pure naivety or foolishness. But when this card comes up, you know, we've reached this card after we reach the world, after we reach spiritual awakening. The Fool is no longer paying attention to these threats. He's not paying attention to his surroundings because he has complete faith in both the universe and in himself. And that, my friends, is how to interpret all 22 major arcana cards as well as their reversals. So you've learned a little bit of symbolism and, you know, what the general meanings of each of the cards are. And again, you're free to interpret your tarot deck, you know, with the images. You're free to interpret them however you feel that is best for your intuition. Really, when it comes to the tarot, it's always best to listen to your intuition. If your intuition says that a card means something to you, then stick with that meaning rather than, you know, memorizing 44 meanings for all major arcana cards, upright and reversed. Alright guys, I hope you liked the video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next upload. And if you want more Tarot Explained videos, don't forget to like the video and leave a comment down below. With that being said, I will see you guys next time. Bye! ¿Qué hacen?
Ya ves.
Hi guys, today we're going to be going over how to read.
Today we're going to go over.
Yes, mommy. I was doing so well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Carl Gustav Jung, who was a Swiss. What is this? Who founded analytical psychology. I'm going to redo that one.
Swiss cheese.
Gustav Jung, who was a Swift.
Swift shift.
Oh Lord.
The problem with young, it was too young.
Mommy. I don't know if I did that first part right.
Yes.
The magician. Did I say magician?
Yes.
Okay.
Cut.
Is the first person that the Fool encounters on his. Mami, por favor. The magician is the first. Pero mami, por favor.
Okay.
This card. The justice represents mind and create a strong link as much as the subconscious does. And it is now time to develop. No, I get it. Here's your step.
No, vale.
Sí, pero the noise. Due to our mastery of both our conscious and subconscious mind.
A university degree. That's it?
No, that's not it. Reach the end of the deck. Going through spiritual enlightenment does not. The Fool now does not ignore.